Okay, so in today's training video we're going to be looking at the property strategy of trading leads. Now, building a successful property portfolio, whether you have a lot of cash or none at all starts with being able to find the right properties and deals, and this begins with leads. Now, in the early days you might be looking to build up your cash flow and decide to trade these leads and deals, and this is exactly what this strategy covers. It's a simple process where you generate your own leads for motivated sellers. Now, you'll do your own marketing to get sellers contacting you directly, and you can go even as far as pre-qualifying them or semi-negotiating the leads if you wanted to add value to them. And the more work you do, the more work or the more money you can sell the lead on for. Now, once generated, you'll be able to sell these leads on to other investors who have the cash to buy properties but not necessarily the time to source them themselves. And leads and deals are two separate things and two different kind of strategies. So later on in the training we'll look at deals separately, but this kind of topic is simply just about trading leads. So where is the money? Where do you kind of make your profit on leads? Well, in volume there's quite big kind of margins and big money to be made in selling leads. Now, if you just Google any phrase like kind of sell my house quick or sell my house fast, that type of thing, or any similar kind of phrases, you'll see there's a massive amount of competition. There's a lot of kind of traditional SEO pages you'll see in the normal listings, but there's loads of pay-per-click ads as well that you'll see if you start digging into it a little bit deeper. And these are all competing to generate leads from motivated sellers across the UK. Now, what you may not realise is that a lot of these companies are looking to buy the properties not only kind of for themselves, but there's also a lot of kind of companies that advertise that are just simply lead generation websites. So they're not actually buying those properties themselves, they're just simply generating the leads and then selling them on to other investors. So these companies are just great at marketing. They set up a website, generate leads, and then sell them to individual investors or larger companies. So there's a whole industry set up already to kind of profit from and sell these leads on. And these leads, depending on the amount of qualification that's gone into them and how old they are as well, will range anywhere from sort of £5 to about £50 per lead. And the leads will usually fall into these categories. So you've got the kind of the top of the pile, if it were, is going to be a raw lead. And these are just basic details like your name, address, telephone number, maybe even the mortgage outstanding on the property and the vendor's reason for selling. The next type of lead is a contacted lead, and it's the same as above, but instead you would have maybe done a phone call or an email to the seller to confirm that the details that you've kind of filled in on maybe the online form or the phone call, the original phone call they've made to you, that they've responded to kind of maybe another form of advertising like a leaflet or newspaper, that their deals or details are correct. So it's a contacted lead. The third lead is what's called a qualified lead, and this is where the seller has actually already been kind of semi-negotiated. They've been contacted and you've kind of discussed maybe some sample offers of what you may be willing to put forward, or what an investor might be willing to pay, and if they're maybe looking to, or if they would consider kind of accepting it. And then the fourth lead is an aged lead. So this is a lead that's quite old, possibly kind of 3-6 months plus maybe old. They didn't accept an original offer, but their situation may have now changed. They might be a little bit more motivated and maybe more interested in doing a deal. Now, age leads are very hard to convert due to their kind of age and the fact that often they're not actually contactable. So these are usually the lowest quality leads and they'll sell for the least. Qualified leads, on the other hand, are going to be hotter. There's more information that's been gathered on them, and these will sell for a premium. Now, I know investors that sell a couple of leads a week to friends at networking meetings and just people they've kind of met over the course of their kind of property career, if it were. But I also know large companies that sell thousands of leads a week across different industries. So some might be property related, some might be insurance related or mortgage related. So the options are endless. If you can generate those leads, there's certainly money to be made in them. And you can fit nicely into the mix if this is a strategy that you're looking to do for cash flow. In addition, you can even think outside the box and sell leads on to local estate agents or letting agents for sellers that you've spoken to that won't necessarily accept kind of a low offer based from an investor's point of view, but these vendors still need a solution. They're still in a situation where they need to sell, but they might just be not able to or not willing to accept a decent discount. So you can use those leads in other ways. As we said, maybe look at speaking to local estate agents or letting agents. So the market is big. There's a lot of money to be made if you can find kind of the right leads and the right buyers. It's just a case of getting out there and generating those leads. So let's look at who this situation is best for. Now, because of the level of time it takes to actually set up a campaign and to negotiate the leads if you're going to go down that route, this is really a strategy if you're cash poor and time rich. Now, this is a great strategy, but it can be quite time consuming actually generating the leads, and even trying out the different kind of marketing strategies, from leaflets to newspapers to online advertisement. And ultimately, it's really a cash flow strategy. You're not building up any kind of long-term wealth or assets, and you're not certainly growing your own property portfolio. But if you're time poor, then it may be a better use of your time then to kind of outsource the finding of these property deals to a sourcer, or to somebody that can find the leads for you or negotiate the properties for you. Because if you're time poor and cash rich, it's going to be really a waste of your time to go through this process. Whereas if you're cash poor and time rich, then it's a fantastic starting point. It's a great way to earn cash flow, and it's a great way to use your time to its full potential. Also, if you set up the right systems, then you can be trading leads very quickly. If you start locally, you can sell them on quicker to people that you've maybe met in networking events, and you can build up investor contacts at the same time. Now, there's a range of other ways in which you can find investors, and there's a whole topic on that as well in your training course that we'll cover. But typically, by starting locally, you get to understand the market, you get to meet local investors, and they're going to be your best buyers long term if you're looking at doing a kind of a lead sales strategy or a deal sales strategy. But just as an idea, your starting point should really be about thinking to approach property investors who place adverts locally in newspapers. Also go along to local property networking events in your area, and even use social media, so LinkedIn, Facebook, Google+, just to see who's active in your town and talking about property investments as well. And these are all great ways to find buyers that are going to be motivated to buy your property leads, because they're already active in the property market. So as soon as you start generating, you'll have an exit, and you'll have a way to capitalize and monetize those leads that you're sourcing. Now, there's a range of different assets that will help specifically for this strategy, and the first one is some experience with marketing skills is certainly going to help. This will help you generate leads online from a website, or through maybe more traditional methods like leafleting or newspapers, or even cards in windows. But the ability to understand how to market, how to write headlines, how to write maybe some copy in terms of how you'll do the ads, or how to actually set up a website, or how to create a leaflet, anything like that, that will all kind of help you if you have that experience. It's not a necessity, but it'll certainly help you. The next one is telephone skills and the right personality to actually deal with vendors directly over the phone. So whether that's simply to set it up for maybe a meeting with an investor, or if you're going to negotiate those leads as well over the phone, or to get them to some stage of qualification to add value to those leads that you're selling on, telephone skills will certainly help with that. And then the third one is going to be time. So time to be a regular visitor to networking events, time to set up the marketing systems to actually generate those leads, time to tweak those systems so you can improve the response rates you're getting and the amount of leads you're generating, and also to meet with local investors who are actually going to be the buyers to find your leads. Okay, next we're going to look at the time frame, so how long it should take you to operate this type of strategy. So typically, to get up and running from kind of start to some way to actually generating some leads, you're looking at around 2 weeks. So it's not a great deal of time to actually do that. And this is one of the best things about this strategy, is the speed at which you can get it up and running. Now, certainly some advertising methods are going to take slightly longer, but a pay-per-click campaign, for example, can be set up and running within minutes. Once you've got the website and you've done your keyword research to see what searches people are maybe looking for on sites like Google or Bing or other search sites, then you can set up the campaign relatively quickly. Now, another part of the kind of key aspect of the strategy to do with the speed is that leads are usually traded exactly as they are. So you don't have to wait for any actual property sale to complete, and that which you could usually take anywhere from sort of 4 to 8, even 12 weeks sometimes on some property deals. And they're simply sold as the raw lead or the qualified lead. So as soon as you've actually generated that information and that lead, you can sell it on for an immediate payment if you have the right buyer. Or if you're dealing with a company or a larger setup, then maybe provide 7 days worth of kind of credit to those buyers. And also offer kind of replacements or refunds for uncontactable leads. It's a relatively straightforward kind of process. And by providing kind of replacements or refunds for uncontactable leads, it just helps you build up that relationship with either the individual investors or the larger companies that you're dealing with. So be genuine, provide quality leads, and then you can start to make a very healthy income simply by dominating your local area on this one strategy alone. Now, one of the investor tips that I probably give you when it comes to generating kind of leads in your area is that one of the largest costs to this is time. And that could be delivering leaflets and setting up your kind of patch, if it were, or simply creating your own website. All of these are kind of time intensive if you're doing it yourself. But in the early days, it's probably the best way to stretch your budget and bring down the costs of generating each lead. So if you're planning to sell leads, then you want to be doing this work yourself in the early days where possible, especially if you're cash poor and time rich. Now, outsourcing this work may mean that your cost per lead is going to increase, and it could help, or could mean it's actually harder to make any profit on these types of leads. So I'd only recommend outsourcing this kind of strategy or outsourcing the work involved if you're planning on using the leads for buying your own deals. Or maybe if you're trading deals, so the leads in terms of what you're using them for are going to have much higher profit margins. So you've got a little bit more of a budget to play with to actually get people to do the leaflet deliveries or to get people to set up the websites for you. So as an example, let's say you to spend your own time and £100 on marketing. Now in this example there's no payment going to be for the time, it's simply what your costs are to run the campaign if it were. So this time, this budget could be spent on printing leaflets, so maybe you get 10,000 leaflets for that budget, or designing and building your own kind of small website, so that budget could pay for your hosting and your domain name and a few other things to get your kind of website set up, or simply placing a small newspaper advert. And let's say your £100 budget creates maybe 10 leads, so it costs you about £10 per lead. And then maybe if you sold that lead on for say £20, and depending on kind of the qualified or the how qualified the lead is and how new it is, then as I said, the budget is going to be anywhere from sort of £5 to £50. Typically the industry standard for good qualified leads is around sort of £20 to £30 depending on the location. And also the investor that you're selling to. So if you sold it for say £20, so the lower end of the figure, then you've already made 100% profit and doubled your pot. Now don't get me wrong, it is a time consuming strategy, and if you're working with smaller budgets, you're going to certainly have to put in that time yourself instead of outsourcing, let's say, the development of the websites as we said, or the delivery of the leaflets. But once you've systemized it and you've perfected it, you can easily set it up so you can scale it and it can become a very lucrative part of your business, and you can kind of run it on autopilot. So you can scale this up simply by covering kind of wider areas. You can develop different lead generation strategies, so you can have some maybe local leaflets going out in the area. You could have local lead generation websites. You can have newspaper adverts as well, and all of these will help kind of increase the lead generation and also the ability to scale. So if you scale this up, then you can easily make kind of a couple of thousand per month simply on trading leads if you have the right systems in place. But as we said, it's important to understand that it can be time consuming, especially in the early days. Now, again, we're going to look at a couple of kind of case studies in terms of how not to do it, where the kind of the mistakes can be with this strategy, and also how you kind of can do it. So let's look on kind of the first case study of how not to do it. So when I first started out in property, I wanted to generate my own leads, but I knew that if I went direct to the vendor, then I'd be able to negotiate better deals because there's not going to be no third party involved as well. So if I generated my own leads that were going to be directly to the vendor as opposed to going through estate agents and things like that, as I said, that there's more ability to negotiate higher values and better deals. But I didn't have any background in marketing at the time, and I didn't know how to get leads, and I was starting off with a small budget, so it's quite a limited experience and quite tricky kind of start. But my only experience kind of before then was a leaflet drop I did back in sort of 2004 with my personal training my personal training business, and I sent out 100,000 leaflets, and that went in a local newspaper because I kind of thought it would be easier to do the delivery that way, and I got one phone call, so it was a disaster. It was expensive. It was certainly a learning curve, and I realised then that kind of using local papers and also well, certainly for delivery of leaflets, and also doing large scale leaflet delivery in one hit without testing the adverts and testing the leaflet is a route to failure. So it's a case of testing and tweaking. Now, because of this experience, I knew I wanted to start small, so I decided to try simply a newspaper advert, and I took out the smallest space possible in the property section, and this cost me about £40, and I ran it for just 1 week just to see what the results were really. So my total results from that were no phone calls. Again, kind of a disaster. I thought this was because maybe the advert was slightly too small, so I decided to increase it, doubled the space, unfortunately doubled the cost as well, just in case it wasn't standing out because it was too small. So I ran that for another week. Now again, unfortunately, still had no phone calls. So this was starting to be a very frustrating trial really. It was costing me not really a fortune, but it was money I didn't have to spend, and it was costing me kind of a lot of time to keep tweaking the adverts because I was a bit of a perfectionist with it. I wanted to try and see which one was going to work best, and it was just a case of I was blindly, unfortunately, kind of running the adverts just to see what the results were, but didn't have, as I said, any experience in terms of how newspaper adverts kind of really worked. And I didn't just want to kind of say, okay, let's run the advert again and keep it going. So I looked to do a bit of research into seeing where I was going wrong really. I went out and brought a few of the local papers, all from my kind of nearest town, so I could see directly what the competition was doing. And I compared the adverts in each of the papers and in my local free paper as well, the one that was coming through my door. And I noticed a couple of different things. And that was in the free paper, there were more advertisers, so there's more competition, and I thought that was maybe a sign that was maybe a more established market and there was more leads being generated from that method. But also all adverts in both the free and the paid for papers were significantly larger than mine. So even although I doubled the size of the advert that I'd placed kind of originally, they were still larger, but they were all worded very similar to each other as well. The styles of the fonts, the colours that they were using, and the copy that they were using were all kind of very similar. So I thought that was interesting. I thought I could kind of get some, I suppose, information and knowledge on how those ads were kind of working really in terms of how long they were maybe being run for. So I looked at the same adverts or the same papers over a period of a couple of weeks and noticed that the adverts rarely changed. They tended to be the same advertisers, and they tended to be exactly the same adverts as well. One or two tried different kind of fonts or colours, but it was mainly the same companies advertising week in, week out. And very few just placed an advert for 1 week. So there was none really that I saw where it was a local investor that was just kind of advertising once and then kind of went and gone. So my advert failed simply because I couldn't compete with these other advertisers. My advert was too small. My message was all wrong because the copy was nowhere near the same, I suppose, approach that the other advertisers were taking. And it didn't have a strong call to action, so a reason for the seller to actually contact me. Now I knew I couldn't actually compete on price, so I had to find another way of, I suppose, standing out in terms of how I could compete and stand out from those other adverts if I was going to continue running the newspaper ads. Now, all of the other companies that were doing these adverts were larger brands, typically with 0800 numbers. So I made mine the complete opposite. I changed the wording to be a local investor, copied some of the same sort of headlines and styling, but put my mobile number on the advert and said they could either text or call me if they wanted to. And then I ran the advert for a period of 8 weeks. So mine was still small in terms of its size, but I started to notice some leads coming through sort of slowly. And then as the weeks went by, the leads increased as people were more familiar with the advert and saw it more regularly, and they were more confident to call. As my advert didn't kind of come from nowhere 1 week and then was simply kind of gone the next, they, I suppose, got a little bit more, as I said, confidence in terms of the fact that the advert was going to be there, and I was maybe a slightly more, not necessarily larger, but more approachable company that wasn't just kind of a fly-by-night company, if it were. Now, it wasn't an expensive mistake when I first started out, but it did cost me a lot of time to research and tweak and test and sort of change the adverts in terms of my approach for it in the early days. But it was all part of my kind of learning curve, really. And starting out that way by kind of putting an advert in and failing, and it made me then kind of adjust the way in which I was not only doing the adverts, but also how I was competing with the other companies in those papers and which papers I would use based on where the other companies are advertising as well. So there's three things I'd probably do differently if I was starting out again, or if I was going to kind of do the same process, and that's simply to test small and research your competition thoroughly first. So before you just go kind of hell for leather and put your first advert out there, whether it's a leaflet or a website or a newspaper advert like I did, test, tweak, see what your competition is doing, and check them out in terms of not only what headlines they're using, but where they're advertising, how consistent they are, the message that they're putting across. And that will help you kind of develop your own advertisement and your own style as well. The second thing is to be consistent, and don't just try one method and then discount it after a week because it hasn't worked. You want to be regular with your marketing so people can see your message a number of times and get used to it and get familiar with the fact that you're there and you're an option for them to call if they do want to sell a house. And then the third option is to give a clear call to action. You want to make it easy for people to contact you and give them a reason to as well. So simply saying just something like call today, it does work and it can kind of have some impact, but you want to tell them why they should call. So maybe rephrase a sentence or something to say something along the lines of, we will pay your selling fees if you contact us today. And that's just an example, but that just gives somebody more of a reason to actually pick up the phone and call you today, as opposed to contacting another company or putting off for a week where they might then kind of forget about it and not contact anybody, or they've changed their mind and maybe look to use an estate agent or go down another route. So giving them a clear call to action, give them a reason to actually call you, will certainly help improve your call rates and your leads and your conversion rates as well at the end of the day. Now, one of the case studies of when it's kind of gone right for me is one of my earliest ways of generating leads and finding sellers was through a website. So I spent a bit of time learning how to do what they call pay-per-click or PPC, and SEO as well, so search engine optimization, to see how it worked, so I could generate leads online and that I could get a steady flow of leads kind of coming into the site. Now the downside to this was that I only wanted really to buy local leads. So I was based in the Northwest. There was areas specifically that I covered and some investors that I specifically worked with that would only buy properties in certain locations. So leaflet ads and newspaper adverts are great when you're looking to target a specific kind of region, but they can be pricey if you're not I suppose don't have the systems in place or don't know what you're doing when you're kind of starting out and don't have a specific strategy to use. So I wanted to look at, I suppose, online advertising as a way to generate more leads, and if I learned that and could bring my kind of lead generation costs down, then I thought it would be a great strategy. Now, because the website was running all day and all night and was generating leads across the UK, I was getting leads really in areas that I wasn't covering, so Birmingham or London or Newcastle, and there were leads that I couldn't really do anything with at the time. So at first I just kind of started to ignore them really. There was nothing that I could kind of do or didn't know how to utilize them fully because they weren't in my area. But then after I started to generate a few more, I started to do a bit more research in terms of how I could actually sell those, potentially those leads on. So I found a website that just sold property leads, and it was set up to kind of tie lead sources and investors together. So you could simply upload your leads to the site and then they would sell them on your behalf to their list of investors, which was great. And at the time they were kind of selling them on around about £50 per lead, and the commission was split about 50-50, with 50% going to the site. So in the end I was getting about £25 per lead that I generated out of my area that I was selling online. So I wasn't skilled at internet marketing in any way, and I didn't know how then to actually generate lots of leads other than the regular trickle that was kind of coming through. So I'd set up a website, I'd targeted a couple of kind of keywords that I was doing pay-per-click around and SEO around, but it certainly wasn't high traffic, and it certainly wasn't a full-scale campaign, if it were. It was just sending a regular trickle of leads through. But I was selling around one lead a day from, I suppose, two investors out of my area, and it wasn't a lot at the time, but it certainly added up. And when you're working on a small budget, it really helps, believe me. It helps bring in some more cash flow so you can use and develop your strategies to do other things. Now, if that's something that you are considering doing in terms of setting up a website to generate leads, then again, probably a tip that I'd give you is that internet marketing can be a bit of a minefield in terms of learning the different strategies and how it kind of works, and learning pay-per-click and SEO is important to, I suppose, to certainly spend a bit of time understanding it before you kind of head straight in, because pay-per-click can be very expensive. You can easily lose your cert on paid advertising. It can run away with you very quickly, your budget, and have not a lot to show with it. But once you've kind of done that process of learning how to do SEO, there's a couple of sites that you can use. SEO or Moz is a good site to kind of understand the basics of SEO. So if you Google Moz, M-O-Z, it will come up. But also there's a website called Longtail Pro. And again, I'll put the links into these websites in the comment sections below the video. But that's a great website for understanding how what they call long-tail keywords work. So instead of just things like sell my house or sell house fast, which are going to be quite expensive to advertise on if you were doing, say, pay-per-click, and if you're doing SEO it's going to have quite a lot of competition, you can generate leads for maybe more long tail keywords that would maybe be sell my house quick in Manchester as an example, and trying to learn those kind of keywords using a service like Longtail Pro, or learning kind of how to do the internet marketing side of it. Put your time in at the beginning, and that'll give you some great options really to generate leads on a regular basis. Now again, when I first started off in kind of pay-per-click, it was costing me around £10 per lead to generate when I took into account kind of the pay-per-click costs that I was doing. Now in today's market that's actually quite cheap. The cost per lead to generate on pay-per-click can be significantly higher depending on some of the keywords, because the competition now for some of the main keywords on pay-per-click is quite high. But still, some of the long tail keywords are still quite certainly cost effective to target. And when you're doing SEO, so search engine optimization on a site, again it's a time investment more than a cost investment. But because of the cost that I was generating those leads for, it was not much work really to make an extra £100 per week. And it's only small, but as a sideline to me focusing on my local area, I could put that budget back into the marketing. And if I was committed to just selling leads, then the figures would have been much higher, because I could have generated more leads across the country. I could have increased the scale of the campaigns that I was doing, and this strategy alone could really run a very good cash flow business if you scale it. So if you have the skill set to generate leads, certainly cost effectively in terms of understanding how to market, certainly if you've got some online skills when that comes to creating a website or to do pay-per-click or SEO, that's a great advantage. But even offline advertisements like leaflets or cards in windows and newspaper adverts, and we'll look at all of those strategies as well in later topics in your course, then these are all great strategies to generate leads. It's a fantastic way to earn cash flow and make money with property with very little investment. You don't need large deposits, you don't have to worry about dealing with tenants, and it's simply a case of running a business generating those leads. So hopefully you found that helpful, a good introduction in terms of one of the strategies you can use in property without large budgets, and I look forward to catching up with you in the next video.